What's up, everyone? First off, Mojang swapped how they number releases so the prefix ties to the calendar year, which is why this update's number feels different than what we were used to before. It's meant to make it easier to line up Bedrock and Java drops in the same year, while still letting each platform keep its own cadence. That sets the tone for a year-focused roadmap. But the meat of this particular release is a combination of experimental features and a long list of stability and parity fixes that help Bedrock match Java more closely in certain behaviors and visuals. If you're the kind of player who loves the tiny details, one of the more headline-grabbing additions is that name tags are now craftable in testing using paper plus a metal nugget. So no more relying solely on loot or trading if you want to tag mobs. That's tucked into the experimental toggles for Drop 1 of 2026, meaning you'll have to opt into the experiment to use the craftable recipe right away. Alongside that, baby mobs have been redesigned. New models, updated animations, and different bounding boxes that bring their visuals and behavior closer to what Java players have seen and generally makes them feel more consistent across platforms. The preview builds earlier this year already let creators test the new baby mob look and sounds, and this release lets more players get hands-on with those changes. Beyond those visible features, there's a long laundry list of gameplay fixes that are actually surprisingly impactful once you start playing. Nether portal behaviors were corrected, so ignition and placement are more reliable. End gateway teleport quirks got patched, and a range of mob AI and sound issues. Everything from Nautilus behavior to undead pathing received attention. What that means in practice is fewer moments where a mob gets stuck or animates in a way that breaks immersion, and more consistent multiplayer behavior in shared worlds. On the items and UI side, a few quality of life fixes were applied that you might not notice right away until you inspect gear closely. Horse and Nautilus armors now properly display toughness values. Trimmed armor no longer disappears after suspending and resuming the game, and bundles and chest-saving oddities were fixed, so items persist correctly when you leave and return to a session. Map markers that could freeze when a locator map in an item frame was deleted have been corrected, so your base navigation should feel steadier. Those are the kind of changes that quietly make your playthrough less frustrating. Performance and platform stability received attention too, with a stack of crash fixes and platform-specific adjustments. There were fixes aimed at low-memory Android crashes, menu and input fixes across consoles, and improvements to realms and multiplayer load and transfer behavior, so hosting worlds and joining friends should be more resilient. The update also included technical improvements like a new server version and some Render Dragon lighting tweaks, which are more under the hood but important for servers and map makers who rely on consistent rendering and API behavior. If you're into add-on or content creation, some of the technical changes are worth noting. Certain block components were moved out of experimental, and there are API and schema tweaks that should help creators build more predictable content. It's not flashy, but for anyone who writes behavior packs or runs custom servers, small schema changes can save a lot of debugging later on. The patch also brings fixes to some of the fussy edge cases that people report on forums and feedback channels. Spawn egg behavior that unexpectedly spawned babies in Bedrock when used on adults was clarified in previews and adjusted. Carried item models no longer scale wrong with HD texture packs, and spear rotation when charging was aligned between first and third person views. Again, these are the micro details that make the whole experience feel more cohesive and polished as you play. If you follow community reactions, this update has been picked up by a bunch of outlets and players who enjoy that Mojang is dedicating more releases to parity and polish rather than only adding new content. News sites and community pages have summaries up that highlight the versioning change and the practical fixes. And the feedback channels show people testing the new baby mob art and the craftable name tags in experimental toggles. It's the kind of release that's not about a single big feature, but about smoothing lots of small rough edges across platforms. Wrapping up the technical side, the server bumps and Render Dragon adjustments hint that Mojang is continuing to invest in cross-platform consistency and developer tooling, which should slowly reduce fragmentation between Bedrock and Java experiences. For players, that translates to fewer weird bugs, more predictable multiplayer behavior, and a cleaner canvas for creators to build on. So yeah, expect some visible changes if you opt into the experimental toggle. Craftable name tags and the new baby mob designs are the ones that most players will notice right away. And then a wave of small but meaningful fixes under the hood that improve stability, item behavior, and platform parity. The update is more about making the game feel smoother and more consistent than about introducing an entirely new gameplay loop. And for many players and creators, that's exactly what they wanted. That's the rundown. If you boot up a world and poke around, you'll probably spot a handful of these fixes in action, especially if you were running into any of the bugs that were called out in the changelog.